Joining me live at the desk is Education Minister and Labor's campaign spokesman, as he was last election rather successfully, Jason Clare. How are you? Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, brother.
In such a close contest, how tough and dirty is this campaign going to get?
Oh, it'll be a tight election, and there's a lot at stake, as there is in every election. In this election, the choice is pretty clear. If you vote Labor, taxes will be lower. If you vote for Peter Dutton, taxes will be higher. It's a choice between Labor and a stronger Medicare system or Peter Dutton and nuclear reactors. You can't have both.
You're going to go pretty hard personally on Peter Dutton, though?
Well, Peter Dutton was interesting. He was talking about sledges the other day. This bloke has the biggest glass jaw in Australian politics. You sit in the press gallery. You sit in the press gallery, Andrew, and you see some of the gibbering that happens from Peter Dutton across the chamber. He would have made a good wicketkeeper, just chirping, chirping, chirping. Suddenly somebody holds him to account for some of his policies and he gets a little bit upset. I think that's what elections are about. It's about a choice. It's setting out what we will do to cut taxes, help to make sure that you can see the doctor for free, cut your HECS by 20%, but also make the point that Peter Dutton will cut and that you will pay. And nuclear reactors are a classic example of that.
Are you trying to get in his head, though, under his skin? Calling it the Friday morning was obviously about taking oxygen out of his budget reply speech, and then it seems almost arrogant for the Prime Minister to go to Dickson, to Peter Dutton's own seat, to start his campaign yesterday.
Well, I think Anthony answered that question pretty clearly yesterday. That's the most marginal seat in Queensland. We intend fighting hard to win as many seats as possible.
There's more to it than that. It's a statement, isn't it?
Well, I think what it is a statement that we're determined to fight to win votes right across the country.
Are there concerns in terms of the presence of hecklers, security concerns and the like? I can't remember so many incidents on day one of the campaign before, when normally... they're pretty staged events. There are AFP there, Australian Federal Police, I should say to our viewers.
No, that's true, and I think the AFP do a good job. I wouldn't want to comment on the operational decisions that AFP make, but I think all of us would agree that we're lucky in Australia that we haven't seen what's happened in the US or in the UK, that you can get out there whether you're the leader. Albo was out talking to people at a gym and somewhere else yesterday. He likes to do that. I was at my local shops yesterday. The nature of Australia, if you're a politician or a contender, is you stand there, people come up to you. If they like you, they'll have a chat. If they don't, they'll mumble something I can't repeat on Sky News, or they'll cross the road just to avoid talking to you. But you don't get the sort of stuff that we've seen overseas. And,
Is this a risk, though? I mean, it does make me think that after I see the events of yesterday. And Tony Burke, your friend and colleague, had to actually withdraw from an event in his local area because some hecklers showed up. Have you had any of those hassles or warnings about those hassles in Blacksland as you take on a Muslim vote candidate?
Not to the extent that it's happened for Tony. And what hasn't been reported in the media is a video that basically threatened Tony Burke and said, "Come back here without the police."
Where did that appear? Can I just get
I don't know the name of the account, but we can get it for you. But the key thing here is that's not how democracy's done in Australia. This shouldn't be the way that elections happen. You should be able to go about your day, talk to people, encourage them to vote for you. If they don't want to vote for you, then there's somebody else.
And do you think the Muslim votes candidates are doing enough to condemn this sort of action?
Well, I'm not suggesting for a second that they're responsible for that at all. What I'm saying is that, in an election, we've got to make sure that, people treat each other with a little bit of respect, and we're seeing examples where that isn't the case.
So has Tony Burke been frightened, I guess, by what's occurred in that instance?
No, I don't think so. What he's doing is following the advice of the police, which is what we should all do.
You've announced this morning this task force to draw up laws to prevent supermarket price gouging. When you're announcing a task force, it's hardly urgent action, isn't it? And didn't the ACCC fail to find evidence of gouging as much as you were hoping they would?
Well, I think what the ACCC found is that the supermarkets are ripping people off. Aussies know that, but they found plenty of evidence of it. Examples of where supermarkets would jack up prices and then cut them by a bit and call it a sale, or shrink the size of the packet, what's called shrinkflation, and charge you the same amount. But price gouging is a problem as well, where effectively they jack up the prices excessively because there's not enough competition. And so what we're saying is we're going to make that illegal. This task force will set the rules around how that works, but we've seen it work.
Because you can't name penalties at the moment.
No, the task force will do that. But, the POMs have done this, Europeans have done this, there's 30 states in America where they've done this as well. I think you ask most people, they'll say they've seen plenty of evidence of where the shops are ripping them off, and that's what this is about.
Why do you need a task force, though? Why not a firm proposal this morning? Which you often see in election campaigns, let's face it. Yeah,
well, it's about making sure that Treasury works with the consumer watchdog, that's the ACCC, to make sure that we get it right.
So how long would it take to pull a law together?
Probably by the end of this year.
Peter Dutton says he has the answer to increased energy prices with his gas reservation policy. What do you say to that?
I say it's a con. They promised this 5 years ago and never did it. If you're serious about this, you do what we've already done. We've secured 6 times as much gas for the domestic market as he's promising to reserve here. To be honest, mate, I think it's a distraction from the nuclear reactor policy, which is about as popular as a snake in a sleeping bag. It's on the nose with the Australian people. And apart from being on the nose, it's the most expensive policy that any opposition or government has ever taken to the Australian people ever. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Australian people have got a right to know not just how much it'll cost, but what he's going to cut to pay for it. We know that he'll cut and you'll pay. Is it going to be Medicare? Is it going to be school funding? What else is he going to cut to have to pay for these nuclear reactors, which aren't just going to take a long time to build? It'll be a decade or more before they turn a light on. But we'll, as a country, have to start paying from them from the 4th of May if he wins the election.
Surely it's a good thing to have gas producers provide gas locally, though. It's worked for WA, hasn't it? BlueScope has welcomed it.
Securing the extra gas, which we've done, has helped to lower the price of gas from something like $30 down to $12 a gigajoule. The gas policy that Peter Dutton announced the other night is a cut and paste of what Angus Taylor announced under Scott Morrison 3 or 4 years ago. Now, when they announced that, the price of gas was $4. When they lost the last election, when the Australian people kicked Scott Morrison out, the price was $34. I think that
because of the Ukraine war.
Well, and because those policies didn't work. I think that tells you everything about this policy.
His petrol excise promise, was there ever any thought by Labor to match it?
No, I think the problem with that is it's temporary. The changes we're making to help people with the cost of living are permanent. You want to piss people off, you tell them that this change to petrol prices is temporary. And I tell you what, it'll make a lot of people angry. What they want is permanent help with the cost of living, the $2,500 tax cuts, the cuts to the cost of childcare, which made for the average family is now saving them more than $4,000, or the cuts to their HECS debt, which for millions of Australians are going to save them thousands of dollars.
PM wants to hold his Medicare card out at every press conference, but the opposition's matched you on bulk billing funding, so it's a bit of a ruse, this, isn't it?
Do you believe it? They promised no cuts to health.
Well, they'd be held to account on it.
Yeah, as they were last time. Remember Tony Abbott said...
Well, that didn't end well for
no cuts to health. Well, hang on a second. So Tony Abbott said no cuts to health, no cuts to education. Next thing you know, it was like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just cuts everywhere. And they're following the same moves that Abbott, that Turnbull, that Morrison did here. I'm surprised that Dutton hasn't tackled a kid or played the ukulele yet, but you can guarantee that if he wins the election, that they'll cut Medicare. That's what he tried to do when he was the health minister last time.
You had that announcement with Queensland on the Gonski funding during the week, completing all the state agreements. Yep. Quite an achievement. It's been reported as effectively meaning government schools will receive 25% of funding from the federal government, up from 20%.
Yep.
This also means there's a firm plan to fully fund public schools by 2034.
Yeah.
100% of the schooling resource standard, more than it, and this was first recommended by the Gonski Review in 2011.
Yeah.
Is this actually going to happen?
It will, because of the agreements that we've now struck. This is historic, mate. This has never happened before. We talked about the cuts to health that Tony Abbott made a minute ago. They also cut funding to schools, to public schools, more than $30 billion ripped out of our schools. We're still paying for that today. The real problem with ripping that money out is that over the course of the last 10 years, the number of kids finishing high school in public schools has gone backwards, not by a little bit, by a lot, from 83% down to 73%. This is happening at a time where it's more important to finish school than it was when you and I were at high school. This is about turning that around, making sure more kids finish school, so then more kids go on to TAFE or uni. They get jobs that pay more money, they pay more tax, they create more businesses, more jobs, they create a stronger economy.
If you're sitting here and your kids go to public school, as mine do, I've got to say, but as many viewers would, what does this practically mean for your kids? And does it mean anything, given we will only see it fully rolled out by 2034?
Oh, well, it means more money every year for the schools. It means not just cash. It's not a blank cheque. This is money tied to real reforms to help kids who fall behind when they're little to catch up. Because if you can help a child catch up early, they're more likely to keep up and finish school.
Well, what else? How does it practically roll out?
So at the moment, we do a NAPLAN test when kids are 8. My boy Jack's in 3rd grade. He's just done that test. It's too late at the age of 8 to know whether a child is keeping up. So this will help to fund a phonics test and a numeracy test in kindergarten or prep or year 1 to identify the kids who need more help. And it'll fund the teachers and professionals to intervene early to help those kids who are falling behind through something called catch-up tutoring. Individualised support for kids, where you get them out of a class of 30 into a class of 3 or 4 with one professional, and they can learn as much in 6 months as other children would normally learn in 12 months. In other words, they catch up.
And later in life, high school, what will it mean for high school?
Well, more individualised support for children that are either falling behind or can accelerate faster, but also more mental health support. You know, we know, particularly at high school, lots of mental health challenges that explain why kids are either absent or they're falling behind. So the sort of counselling and psychologists and extra mental health support will make sure that kids do better at school.
All right. Well, story in the Sunday Telegraph this morning, boys making horrible comments about young women on social media. What's your reaction to that story?
Disgusting. You know, and I think any dad looking at that would be disgusted by it and would hope that their son would never be involved in something as despicable as that. You know, I think there's a role here for schools in making sure that we're teaching young boys good behaviour. That's why we're rolling out $70 million in consent and respectful relationships education for boys when they're young. But it's not just what happens at school. We've got roles as dads here to make sure that we raise our boys properly. When we hear our mates talk about women in the wrong way at the pub or in general conversation, we've got to call that out as well. I think that what we're doing with banning access to social media for young people under the age of 16 is important here as well. You know, if I know how old your kids are. If they're seeing the sort of crap that Andrew Tate and people like that talk about, then that sort of toxic cesspit can affect our kids.
There's been a lot of talk about this series Adolescence. I confess I haven't seen it, but I have heard about it. Are you aware of its content?
Yeah, I am.
Have you seen it?
Talking to my wife about it last night. It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
We saw in the recent international student numbers that we had 200,000 international students come here in February. Of the 335,000 we have coming into the country at the moment, 335,000 net people, 40 to 45% of them are international students. What's your plan to arrest this increase in net migration caused by students? Because you tried student caps and you couldn't get it through the parliament.
Yeah, well, I think Peter Dutton blew his credibility on immigration when he voted against it. You know, he beat his chest a year ago and said he was going to have caps on international students, and then he opposed it. If they opposed that, they got into bed with the Greens to stop that. We achieved the objective in another way through a ministerial direction that we put in place in December. And I can tell you that the number of visa applications from international students today is about 30% lower than it was a year ago, and that's because of the changes that I'm making.
But Australians are right to be sceptical, aren't they, of your budget prediction you can pull net migration down to 225,000?
No, because international students are a big part of that. And the two things that we've done are increase the visa charge for international students. That came into place in July, put into place this new direction that helps us to achieve the objectives of the cap in a different way. And we're seeing the impact of that now. As I said, a 30% reduction on applications for visas by international students in the last year. Now, just to add to that, so Peter Dutton made a vague comment in his budget reply the other day about how he's going to be tough again on international students. My challenge to him is, will he set caps for those private education providers that are donors to the Liberal Party. If he doesn't, he's going to say something about this soon, if he doesn't, then the question should be asked, why?
Why not introduce a test for international students through the ATAR system to lower the numbers of them coming here?
Well, we're doing it. I just answered that question. We're seeing a reduction there of 30%, and in particular...
You're doing a test?
No. Well, we're reducing it through... and we're achieving the objective that you've asked me about in another way, and that is through, number one, the fee, and number two, through that direction that sets a way that Home Affairs process those visas. So that is working now. It's seen a bigger reduction in the number of people coming here to do some of those vet courses than to do university courses.
You served in the last minority government, which was widely viewed as a bit of a disaster. How do you feel about serving in a government where you need the Greens again for confidence and supply?
We won't, because we won't be doing any deals with the Greens.
Well, you'll need someone for confidence and supply if you don't hit the magic number 76.
Well, we intend to hit that number. And
what if you don't?
Well, we're not even contemplating that, mate. We are seeking the support of the Australian people for a majority Labor government.
Jason Clare, thanks for your time.
Good on you, mate.